Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, we're just going to do a quick review on a story we did last week. This is all to do with the, how can we put this, the safe rooms for people who want to use various substances. These places where people can go and then they can get free needles and, they can be there's medical care there, they can be safe when they do this. And I was sort of sat initially on the fence, I think, because yes, on one hand it's somewhere safe, on the other hand it's sending out the wrong message. But as you look through the comments, the vast proportion of you, the vast majority of rather, were very, very unambiguous on it and saying it was a bad thing. That was the general consensus. There were some other people saying, alternative views, and that's fine. That's the whole point of the comments, is so we do see other viewpoints and take them on board. It's an open forum, and I don't castigate people for having views. But we have here, this is what the follow-up is, we have a medical doctor who's giving his view, and it's very much aligned with the majority of you good people who took the time to comment. But he is, as I say, a medical doctor, so he's dealing with the sharp end of this. No pun intended. He's dealing with the actual repercussions of what's going on. So I thought it's just worth just quickly having a flick to see what he says, giving his view, and then we'll move on. But I think it's quite an interesting piece. So I thought we'll go in and have a look, because it seems that ultimately you good people were right. Here goes. So, substance consumption rooms are morally void, says doctor who questions what SNP Scotland has to offer addicts. I'm going to have to whiz this picture through because they don't like paraphernalia on the screen for very long. But questions over the success of legal substance taking facilities have been raised as Glasgow gets the green light, and critics say supporters are aiming for the lowest common denominator. But it was ever thus with this particular government. Let's just whiz that up because, as I say, don't like images of paraphernalia on there. Substance consumption rooms are morally void and are a prime example of Scotland's cult of low expectation when it comes to the shameful death crisis for these particular substances, a leading doctor has claimed. Dr. Carlton Brick, a sociologist from the University of the West of Scotland, has previously warned that the US opioid epidemic pales in comparison to Scotland's crisis on this issue. This week, the UK's first consumption rooms where addicts will be free from arrest while they take substances like H in the company of medics who will hope to revive them if they overdose, was given the green light for Glasgow's East End. Now, the taking and possession of these substances is still illegal, and their use is still illegal. And so one of the things that came out in the comments mainly was you're enabling crime. And I did actually put that in the video, and I'm saying if the Scottish government is effectively enabling these people to commit a crime and something happens, who is legally responsible? It's a very, very grey question, and it's one that hasn't been addressed. And I think before this happens, it's one that absolutely, positively needs addressing. Because if, for example, some medical person there, some nurse who's been drafted in, would she be morally and, more importantly, legally responsible should anything happen? And if that's the case, if they're going to be made legally responsible, no one's going to want to do the job. You see what I mean? It's going to be a bit of a job to hire someone and say, well, yeah, no, you're in charge here, you get this, you're only getting the normal money, but if anything happens, you're going to jail. It'd be like, yeah, thanks, no thanks, bye. Anyway, the SNP Substance Abuse Minister, Elena Whittam, the Canadian who must be actually on something like this because the policies she comes up with are not the policies of a normal mind, says, we know that this is not a silver bullet, but we're confident it would save lives. Well, you were confident that the minimum unit price of alcohol would save lives. That turns out to be not so. So what makes you think that you're confident this will? Based on what data? Dr. Brick is one of a group of harsh critics who say the lack of addiction support behind the scenes undermines any successes the pilot project might have. Speaking to the Scottish Express, he said, "There's a real moral void here. We have a very narrow discussion around the lowest common denominator, the kind of cult of low expectation, in that we can't really expect addicts not to be addicts. Of course not. Once you're there, you've got no wish to come off it, without major help. And self-help mainly, of course, but you do need outside assistance. And you're speaking to someone who smoked 40 cigarettes a year for 30 odd years. Let me tell you, coming off that I was ready to kill. It was like, I was climbing the walls. The 2.3 million facility will work from an already existing centre in one of the worst impacted regions of Scotland. Dr. Brigg is not the first to share doubt, with campaigners from Favour UK, Amory Ward, surmising that the rich get rehab while the poor get methadone. And I have to say it like that because if you say it properly, it sets up the filters. So don't knock my pronunciation on that one. Dr. Brigg says we have to take out addiction as a norm. If all we can do is intervene to keep them alive when they OD, I think that's the problem. It is. You've got to put more in than just giving them a space to just do these things. Because otherwise they're just going to come along and do it. And you're going to get people who go, well, I've never done it before, but if I do it there, then I know it's safe. I'll give it a go. That could happen as well. Nobody thinks these things through because it's the SNP. Nobody thinks anything through with the SNP. They lack the intelligence to see the consequences of their decisions. And they refuse to fund it properly. There's no funding for rehab here. It's just a room where people can just do the thing they can. Break the law. It's just a room where people can break the law and not get arrested. But as I say, who is responsible if anything happens? Nobody knows. The SNP backs the DCRs by saying that we know from evidence from more than 100 facilities worldwide that safer consumption facilities work. But they do them differently. They do them with rehabilitation. They do them with a massive amount of funding and help. You're just giving them a room and a nurse. It's not the same thing. This is a mantra, says Dr. Brigg. It says if you actually investigate that evidence, it's a bit more grey than it is black and white. There isn't some kind of body of evidence that says yes, they work, particularly in reducing particularly in any facilitating recovery. So, he's saying they're claiming it works. He's saying it doesn't really without, sufficient resources to aid, getting the people off them, basically. They may work in keeping these people alive because that's what they're supposed to do, but they're meant to function in a broader recovery strategy, and there's very little evidence to suggest that safe consumption has any meaningful role to play, and it only makes sense when there's a broader commitment, political and social, to providing with facilities beyond just keeping them alive. In other words, facilities to get them off the substances in the first place, which nobody's doing. He said there are questions to be asked about the type of Scotland that focuses merely on harm prevention and misses out on the holistic support. SNP government have already been blamed for shutting down rehab centres, a move that many have linked to Scotland trending for the worst death rate in Europe from these substances. Yeah, I mean, they're closing down the rehab centres and just say, go along to your chemist and getting your methadone. Again, got to say it that way because otherwise YouTube throws a fit. And it just goes on. It's giving examples here. Now, writing in the Daily Mail, what's her name? Rosemary Bean, a travel writer who lived in Portland in Oregon, warned of a previously attractive city turned into lawless no-go zones as these people have flocked to use the free facilities. She said what happened in Portland should serve as a warning to Scotland. Painting a grim picture, she says city centre parks have been given over to these people, as well as homeless services tents. ODs and deaths have surged. Crime has gone from pretty petty theft to now common car break-ins, maulings, from out-of-control dogs, arson, and very physical attacks have risen. And she said the sad reality is that Oregon legalised these substances without having the free-of-charge, large-scale specialist facilities that would be needed to attempt to fulfil the promise to both the victims and the voters. A promise that ignored the reality that most people who constantly take these stuff are unfixable by anyone but themselves. Portland has turned into an absolute hellhole because of it. They said, oh no, they'll just make it legal, then it'll be all fine and nobody will care. We won't do it. Well, you walk around and it's just a city of zombies, human feces on the street, homeless everywhere. They're boarding up. One of the big complaints was all the big shops are leaving Portland. They're going, well, this is just plain wrong. Why stay? You got to stay. We need these shops. They say, well, no, we can't afford it. We open up a shop and people just coming in and stealing from us every day, and you're getting all these big stores. I mean, we're talking the big boys here. Your Walmarts are just closing up, saying, well, no, we're losing £10,000 a day in shoplifting, so no, we're not prepared to do it. And I go, well, what are people going to do? So, not our problem. You've got a police force. You've got a council that's doing nothing. You've got a police force that's doing nothing. And that is what will happen in the East End. You start inviting all these people around. Do you think it's going to improve the area? Probably not. Anyway, I'm going to round off and come up. Now, one way I heard that can help is a thing called boot camping. And it's basically where you take these people off and you more or less put them in a military surrounding. And they're kept well away from their quote friends, other words, the bad influences that are there. They're given medical treatment as they're kept off, and they basically get them off. They go cold turkey, and they sit there and they're supported while they jonesing for these things. They go through all that, and there's sharp physical training all the time. Bang, bang, bang. Running, keep fit, push, push, push. Education, keep fit, fed well. All this takes about 8 weeks. They come out at the end of it, and they've had all the 8 weeks of being off it and clearing down their system, but they also have 8 weeks of self-improvement and gives them a better outlook on life. And the physical kicks that they get from the training does a lot for their mental state, and that's been shown to work. But of course that's expensive, and the SNP aren't in the game of spending money on people, not when they can spend money on other things, wasteful things that are no use to people. So you have to ask the SNP what their priorities are. But certainly providing a nice attractive place for all these people to congregate in one small area isn't going to be a good thing. And if you happen to live in that area, then I'm deeply, deeply sorry, because you too will end up with homeless dossers on the street, human feces in the gutter, and a place completely unsafe for your children to play. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'm sorry to end on such a low note this time, but we will have a better video next time, I'm sure. In fact, we will, because I've seen which one it is. And until then, stay safe, stay well, and remember, these people need help, not judgment, but ultimately it's the SNP that are causing a lot of this problem. Bye.